First and foremost, just want to welcome everybody. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Basil from Inventory Planner. We have Jill as well, Jill Lilladall from Inventory Planner, and Brendan Feeney from Linnworks. And we're excited to chat with you a bit today, but just first and foremost, going through a few things. Firstly, just want to thank Linnworks for being part of this and partnering with Inventory Planner to talk through scaling and adding sales channels and locations with your business. This is going to be an exciting opportunity to learn a little bit about just inventory, not just inventory management, but inventory planning. So in anticipation of a question here that might come up, do Linnworks and Inventory Planner do the same thing? Manage inventory? Nope. So Linnworks is an inventory management system. It's a cloud-based platform. It connects and automates all the processes related to multi-channel selling, allowing businesses to manage inventory, orders, and fulfillment all from a single dashboard. Whereas Inventory Planner is really focused in on forecasting, replenishment analysis, reporting, and analytics. So it works seamlessly with Linnworks in the sense of it's not the inventory management system. We refer to a master source of information to draw on for products, stock, sales, and everything to act as an extension to the tool to really dig into your forecasting and replenishment and reporting needs. One thing to keep in mind is that we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending out this recording within 24 to 48 hours to all registrants. So just something to keep in mind there. You can ask questions anytime at the bottom of your panel here in Zoom. You'll see a Q&A option there and a chat function as well there at the bottom. So feel free to drop questions as you have them. As a quick overview of what's going to happen today. First, we're going to hear a bit from Brendan from Linnworks about the importance of expanding new sales channels in order to meet customers where they are. We're going to go through any questions that you might have at that point for a few minutes. And then we're going to have Jill come in and talk a bit about forecasting customer demand and when selling across channels and optimizing stock for different locations, how it all comes together essentially. So a little bit from Brendan, some moment for questions, a bit from Jill, and then we'll leave a few minutes at the end as well for some questions. But let's dig into the exciting stuff here. All right, so I want to introduce Brendan. First, Brendan here is an enterprise sales executive for Linnworks in North America. Almost a decade of experience in software and e-commerce. He'll be sharing with us the business case for diversifying your sales channels and how to do so without disrupting the rest of your operations. So without further ado, I'll pass this over to Brendan. And again, feel free to drop questions as you have them throughout the webinar today. All right.
Thank you, Basil. Thank everyone for joining and thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you, Inventory Planner, for doing this webinar with us as well. What I'll do is I'll start to share my screen just a second and open up the presentation for the discussion today. Great. So what we're going to be talking about today is, as Basil mentioned, really going into what it's like to sell into this multi-channel landscape, how consumer expectations have dramatically changed online. Part of this due in light of the pandemic, but a lot of this was happening even prior to that, just this transition and that's been happening of coming on digital, being able to shop in various different places. And what we want to really provide the audience today and a lot of the viewers that are joining in with us is talking about what it's like to be able to meet these needs, what you can do to better prepare, and what is happening in the industry to be aware of our best practices. So what we'll really go into today is what we've noticed, and a big thing that we're focusing on seeing in the industry is this idea around the effortless economy. It's just, we've seen a dramatic change in expectations from consumers as everyone's been coming more online, that across wherever they're spending time, whatever medium or channel that they're engaging with, consumers now have an expectation that if they want to make a purchasing transaction, they don't want to go through hoops and hurdles. They want the ease of convenience. They want it to be a frictionless experience. And whether that's within any product that you're selling on, any device, any channel, if they want it then and there and now. So that's creating new challenges for brands of how can we keep up with this moving landscape, this moving needle that e-commerce brings. And in order to meet those expectations, how do we make sure that we're doing all the right things to meet our consumers wherever they're spending time and to reach all these different audiences? So this is what we're seeing, the effortless economy. It's a big focus in what we're seeing in terms of the shift in the industry. And more of this is going to just keep coming as more marketplaces continue to emerge and as more channels continue to pop up online for areas for brands to sell. Now, over time, we've seen this transition of brick and mortar stores. It's one of the most popular ways that folks began their shopping experiences. It's definitely taken a hit this year due to COVID. And it's caused a lot of brands to think about shifting strategy and how can we make sure that we have a strong online digital strategy. But even prior to that, we've seen this transition happening that more and more brands are thinking about as footfall is dropping off to these brick and mortar stores. How can we bring more folks to our website and how can we drive that great direct-to-consumer experience? And then from websites, we've now seen the rise of marketplaces. They're extremely popular. It creates a whole new opportunity for brands to reach new consumers, wider audiences. And it's great for consumers because they have one-stop shops, ease of convenience, going to one place to make all their purchasing transactions. And what we see coming pretty quickly after this is the rise of effortless consumption. We're seeing channels historically that have really just cared about driving advertising, impressions, engagement, now flip to create purchasing transaction models. The likes of Google, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok are now creating their areas to drive more of a purchasing experience. So there's been this shift online that's happening, and we want to make sure that we can help brands meet that. And how can you think about being in all these different areas as the needle keeps moving within e-commerce? Now, of course, there's a massive opportunity here for brands. The folks that are going to be taking advantage of this, the ones that want to go and scale out to meet new consumers online and to meet this omni-channel experience are the ones that are going to be more successful. They're the ones that are going to see better growth. And the ones that won't or be more reluctant, they'll still see growth, but just at a slower rate. Because certainly if you're not selling in these areas, your competitors are. You want to make sure that you have great brand presence online, that you are in the areas that consumers are looking for you. And as you can see here, there's a massive revenue opportunity with that. Microsoft even had done some forecasting around this, and a lot of the bigger thought leadership type of companies, that there's just a huge growth that we're going to see in the next few years, either B2B, B2C, that there's just going to be a big presence on these marketplaces due to the convenience. Now, in light of that, what we're seeing is marketplaces truly are the new players of the world. We're seeing more and more continuously pop up, whether it's within some of the social commerce channels that are rising, whether it's new channels emerging every day. What's so fascinating about these different marketplaces is as more and more consumers start to spend or start to engage with different ones that arrive, they get more and more powerful as they get a wider audience, they get wider networks of people that are coming to them looking for certain products. And as a brand, and you're thinking about, well, what marketplace do I want to sell on? Where could we perhaps grow our next revenue stream? Definitely think about what the product market fit looks like. What are other type of similar products selling on these different marketplaces? Is there areas that you could perhaps take advantage of that or find ways to maybe test out some of these areas? Because each one of them brings a different type of experience, brings new consumers that are looking for certain items. So you can really take advantage of that and make sure that you're reaching potentially new consumers for your brands, as well as new buyers, just to making sure that you want to make sure that you're being visible in the right ways, in the right places as the people are looking for you. Now, going back to the big revenue opportunity this is going to be bringing, across each of these areas, we see even Google now having a big presence, that they're going to start to have a big focus on this. Amazon and Google typically dominate the search engines and a lot of the advertising of traffic that's coming online. And essentially, with that in mind, we're seeing that there's so many different areas that are continuing to pop up, whether it's the big marketplaces that we've known for quite some time, like Amazon, eBay, and Walmart, more of the specialty marketplaces like Etsy, Wayfair, Zalando. What's interesting about these, if you start to think about different purchasing transactions or different products you're looking for, it's going to guide you to new areas. Certainly when I think of furniture, Amazon may not be my first area that I go to. I may think about going to other different channels. There's just becoming more diversification across this. And now we're seeing even the social media platforms take a role in terms of making sure that they have a play. A lot of the folks are even coming on to those areas, and they're trying to have that balance of entertainment, engagement, as well as creating that seamless purchasing journey. So this is just a huge revenue opportunity across the wider network for folks to take advantage of. So there's a big area that folks can tap into here across a various different amount of marketplaces. Now, going back to the social commerce, because I think this is quite new, and I'm not sure how many of the audience that's listening in is aware of some of the changes that are happening online, but we've seen this dramatic shift happening, and even Google is starting it right now, where historically, Google always maintained the top of the funnel. Everyone started their search, started a lot of their beginning of their online journey, and you're starting with Google. And then you'd end up on an Amazon or something that would really provide that shopping cart checkout experience, getting to that product or brand. But now, since Amazon is really dominated in terms of their advertising, they're winning more of this traffic back. So we're going to start to see an interesting transition where Google will provide a more easy convenience for brands to sell through them. We're even hearing rumblings that they may not even charge fees and just charge for their purchasing on their payment portal, on your checkout. They want to win more traffic back from Amazon. It'll be interesting to see how this dynamic plays out. As more and more of even the younger generation, as more folks are coming online, they're engaging so much time on these social commerce platforms, it only makes sense that this will be the next step, that you'll start to sell through these areas as well. And what we're seeing too is that even 35% of shoppers now are purchasing through social media. And it's just becoming so convenient that it's that whole idea of instant gratification. If you see something, you want it, let me make that purchase right then and there. Now, what we're also noticing is a lot of this discovery is even happening, even starting on some of these social commerce channels as well, whether it's Facebook now launching their marketplace, Instagram now flipping their platform and creating that Instagram shopping experience, or even YouTube now trying to play a role. Each of these channels will start to think about how they can further monetize their platforms and how they can create a better experience for consumers that are spending time on their platforms to then allow purchasing as well. So it's just this trend that we wanted folks to be aware of, because it's a very new trend that's coming quite quickly. And we think these are coming very, very fast. Even this year going into next year, we'll see more and more brands selling in these areas and taking advantage of this. Now, one of the big things I wanted to also talk about today, and I think it's a focus for a lot of folks just coming up in the next month or so, is Prime Day and what to be aware of. Now, as we think about the omni-channel landscape and think about ultimately what this means, Prime Day, how this is going to be a lot different this year, the things to think about is that we're even noticing from last year into 2019, 2020, that Amazon is no longer dominating all the rest of the share of traffic of folks that are looking online with Prime Day. We're now hearing the likes of Walmart, Target, everyone wants to create sales because they know that it's created almost a holiday of shopping across everywhere on that day. Amazon is definitely the founder of this, but other channels as well have jumped on board and want to create great deals, great incentives to drive a high amount of traffic to their sites. So as a brand, as a seller, what you can really think about is, what products do you make great margins on? Is there areas that you can perhaps provide a better discount or a better sale across the areas that you're selling on, across the multi-channel environment you're selling in, to then drive more sales on these days? And this is really how we work so closely with Inventory Planner as well. You need to make sure that you have that forecasting truly as solid as possible, so you know how to prepare for this. You know how to make sure that you have the right forecasting in place in stock to meet all this demand that's going to be coming quite fast on these big days of selling. So it's something to be mindful of. It's not just going to be with Amazon. You'll see this on a vast amount of different marketplaces, that there'll be a lot of sales to be had throughout the Prime Day. Now, the last two things I wanted to talk about too is just around this multi-channel landscape, because we see it so often here too, even at Linnworks, is we're noticing the rise of the diversification of marketplaces. Historically, even apparel brands have been very reluctant to get on the likes of Amazon or get on certain channels like Walmart. And now we're seeing other marketplaces, even in the UK, like Zalando, Farfetch, these other ones that are gaining more and more traction. Another marketplace, even Frugo, is the second highest growing one in the UK right now. There's more and more of these arriving quite quickly, and it's going to create a bit of slower growth for Amazon because there's going to be more areas that are going to create more competition online, which is great for sellers. It gives you a huge opportunity to reach a wider audience and not just have to be buried between a few of the major players, that you'll have an opportunity to get on areas, to meet new audiences, to find maybe a more product market niche that fits your brand. And as well, you can really take that as far as you want, whether that's domestically, globally. We're going to see more and more of these gaining in traction and popularity, and each one of them will have a unique offering that will be really unique to consumers. Now, some considerations when you're thinking about going multi-channel, since this is really what our bread and butter is, it's just you need to think about a few different things. Think about, as you're looking at new channels to explore, what does the product market fit look like? I had said that earlier in the conversation, but how can we test that? How do we benchmark what success looks like for us? How do we want to find the right marketplace to test out next? Are there any similar products that we know that are selling well in these areas? Now, you don't need to go in and put all your inventory online or put them all onto this channel, but maybe take some of your higher selling items on your other channels that you're selling on and test it out, see how they sell, see how effective it is. What you really need to make sure as you're going out to these different areas and you're selling these different areas, having that control, because there's a lot of complexities as someone's ordering on Amazon or Walmart or your website, that you're making sure all of your inventory is up to date, that you're reflecting the right levels, you have control over your prices, your descriptions, because you want a great brand experience. You want consumers to have a similar experience from Amazon, Walmart, to your site, to eBay, to wherever you're selling, and they're getting that consistently wherever they're looking for you. And this also hand in hand is really also how Inventory Planner comes into play for a lot of our clients too, because they want to make sure they're keeping up with that demand, that they have that forward insight and analysis to understand, when are we replenishing? How do we keep up with all of our stock control? What does our different sales look like over the seasonality periods? So it's just making sure that you're thinking about and being mindful of all these things, because as you go multi-channel, there is that risk without the right foundation in place of overselling or stocking out or having to suppress stock. And that just limits growth goals, and it limits what your ultimate goal is to drive as much revenue as possible through these areas. And lastly, I wanted to just take an opportunity just to share a little bit about what Linnworks does. As Basil mentioned earlier in the conversation, we truly sit in the tech stack as an ability to connect out to the omnichannel environment. We natively connect to over 70 channels. We can provide the ways to bring that all in, so your inventory is updating real time. You have order control and can do order routing, and then really down to that fulfillment. We're truly helping out optimize all the operational processes for businesses, and then connecting out to the omni-channel environment and manage all the complexities that come with that. So I wanted to just preface that too. And that's really what I wanted to talk to everyone about today, and open to any questions as well.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Yeah, please feel free to drop your questions down here in the chat at the bottom right, or in the bottom of the panel, you'll see a Q&A button. And again, if you're just trying to refresh basically on anything, this webinar is going to be sent after the call. I do see a couple attendees have raised their hands, so I'm assuming this is all just some excitement. But we do actually have a question here from Ori. He's curious if can we expand on point of sale solutions through Linnworks a bit?
So different point of sale solutions through Linnworks. Linnworks truly, we can connect to a few different point of sale solutions, ones like Square and a few others that are out there in the market. But typically a lot of those point of sales are happening directly on the marketplaces or on like an online store, as like a Shopify, a BigCommerce, WooCommerce, Magento. They all have their own checkout payment sections and payment portals. So we often have the financial process go through those areas. Linnworks is more of the aggregator, giving all the inventory order control, and can feed that information down to an accounting package or an ERP package for financial reconciliation.
And do you have a list of those PS solutions listed anywhere, so our webinar attendees are able to find that?
Yeah, I believe it's within on one of our Linnworks pages. I could try to have someone on the team drop it into the chat if possible, as Jill's speaking throughout the next part of the conversation.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Ori, there for the question. I see also a hand up here from Nerea. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in. There is also a question over here. So I'm just curious, how fast does Linnworks update data in the dashboard?
Great question. So I would say it varies depending on online store for marketplace. So within marketplaces, we're updating data within our dashboard as quickly as the APIs allow us. So within Amazon, eBay, the big ones that are out there, it's typically every 5 to 10 minutes that updating API information is pulling through all of the order information. When it comes to the online stores and websites, typically that's every 1 to 2 minutes. It's a bit quicker. We've implemented webhooks so we can pull that data down in a faster way, where when you get access to the Amazon APIs of the world, you're limited to how quickly they can go as well, because they have a lot of people accessing those APIs.
Awesome. Thanks. Another question here from Ori as well. So what are the main differences between, say, whether it's Linnworks and Deer, or how does Linnworks stand out as an inventory management system versus some of the other solutions?
Sure. No. And I think that's a great question too. So Deer, great for inventory planning, as well as a bit of order management. Where I think Linnworks truly is different in the market is what we're coming to is with a total commerce platform. Not many companies can do the ability to do channel listing and bulk create and push up listings to marketplaces. We have a vast amount of them, over 70 of them, as well as the social commerce channels. We do have similarities to Deer in terms of inventory order management, but also we drive a lot of optimization around warehouse and fulfillment. So connecting into shipping carriers, helping out the label printing and the pick, pack, dispatch processes. So Deer does a piece of what Linnworks does, but Linnworks truly is that end-to-end system from what I've seen on the market.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's a great question. So I just want to encourage anyone who's, whether an inventory planner user or anyone who's considering inventory planner with Linnworks as an integration, to be sure to check out inventory-planner.com and check the integrations page and click on Linnworks just to see how flexible their API is. The systems really sync up very well. There's a lot of awesome information that draws in between the systems, including, if you have multiple warehouses, multiple locations, not only are we going to see purchase orders that already exist with vendors that you would have in Linnworks, those would be drawing into Inventory Planner automatically. As you create new purchase orders, Inventory Planner would offer the ability to just send that over to Linnworks to handle your receiving and everything over there. But it also works with warehouse transfer orders, which is just very exciting. So it allows you to really delineate whether you're doing a global perspective to plan POs or really diving into a specific location and planning replenishment for one location. It's a really seamless way to sync between the two different systems. Another question here, should I list my whole product catalog on a new sales channel?
So that's an interesting question as well. It really comes down to how much products that you have and how big that catalog is. What I typically see for best practice is taking a portion of your catalog and testing that different marketplace, maybe your highest selling items or one that you know that are very popular, and then ramping from there. But there's no, I think, right or wrong answer to that. I think you also can have the opportunity, if you want to list all of them, you have that ability to do so. There's just a best practice way that you can go about it. Typically, you want to establish some success before you build more and more into that catalog. But really, it just comes down to what amount of effort that's going to take from a seller standpoint. If you have a very robust catalog, is that going to take more work to then quickly get on this marketplace without really getting to test it? So there's different variables to consider. But what we typically see is folks will take a portion of that catalog, put it on a new marketplace, and then scale from there.
Great. One question, are you able to generate FBA shipments or shipment plans from Linnworks into Amazon?
So this is actually some newer functionality that Linnworks is currently in development with. Since we're fortunate enough that we do sit on Amazon's Market Development Council, we've been working very closely with them on the FBA inbound shipment functionality. It's currently in a beta with us and should be released very soon in the coming month to 2 months. That should be a further in our roadmap to be able to release for clients.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
What are the best marketplaces to start multi-channel selling on for the first time?
For the first time, I would say that the most popular ones typically we see are Walmart, eBay, Amazon, Etsy, and it really truly depends on what product you're selling. If you're selling in the furniture space, maybe you're testing out Wayfair. But typically, those four ones I see most prominent because they have the biggest reach and the biggest consumer audience.
Great. Okay, and we'll just do one more question here. If anybody else has anything, feel free to drop it in. But we're curious, is social commerce exclusive to certain types of products?
No, and that's one of the beautiful things about social commerce. There's no exclusivity to certain types of products. It's going to be very interesting how quickly this starts to expand. And there's a massive opportunity, whether you sell electronics, home and furniture, beauty apparel, you name it, there's going to be an opportunity to reach those guests on these social channels. So most folks are already spending advertising, are already having ways to drive revenue through these social channels. Now folks will start to sell through them as well in the very near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brendan. Appreciate that. Well, we're going to segue over to Jill. Jill, as a former user and now a lead of the business development for Inventory Planner, Jill works with merchants to be more efficient and make smart inventory purchasing decisions. She's going to share a bit more about how to forecast customer demand and how that affects the financial health of your company as it grows. So without further ado, pass that over to Jill.
All right. Thanks so much, Basil. And thanks for the introduction and all that information, Brendan. I think there's definitely some new marketplaces that you met I've not heard of before, whether in other countries or specific to particular products. So that was interesting. Now we're going to talk about, okay, when you are expanding to other sales channels or you're managing other warehouses. So for example, if you're getting into Amazon first time, that's going to be a separate location of your stock compared to if you have a central distribution center or another warehouse. So we're going to talk about some concerns for managing stock, both so that you're not missing out on sales and so that you're not tying up your money, your business's money in stock at any of those locations. So we're going to get into some key considerations with that. First, what I'm going to do is get into some of the foundational ideas and considerations for forecasting customer demand. So what we're doing with customer demand, what do we mean by that term? So what we're thinking about is using the data you have to figure out what are your customers most likely to want, when are they going to want it, particularly important if you have seasonal items, and where are they going to want it, which is relevant to today when we're managing for multiple warehouses, multiple sales channels. Do we have it available to them where they are shopping right now? So we're going to get into this. So we've just launched this poll and inquiring with you to see what is your biggest challenge with forecasting. So we talked to lots of merchants who are maybe doing this with spreadsheets. We might have some current inventory planner customers here as well. And looking ahead to, there are a lot of things that can really affect the financial health of your company. So just trying to get a sense of that, and we can kind of adjust and really speak to those points as well. So while that poll is running for just a little while longer, so I'll get into some key points of forecasting accuracy. So what we're doing is looking at what is the past customer behavior. So where have they actually spent their money? That's going to be the best indication of where they're likely to spend money in the future. Now, some key questions that we're thinking about with this past data that we have, this customer data, their order data. What period in the past is most relevant for thinking about how to forecast for the future? So let's see, we'll just share with you the results of this poll so you can take a look. So running out of stock looks like it's the highest concern, then getting into spending a lot of figuring out what to order and then figuring out when to order. Okay, so great. Thank you so much for your input on that. We'll definitely dig into all of those points and figuring out how do you avoid running out of stock there. Okay, so this key question, what period of sales is most relevant for forecasting? So first, think about your products, and you could have a mix of products in your catalog. So for example, you could have seasonal and non-seasonal items. Let's talk first about seasonal items. So when I talk about seasonal products, that can mean things that are available only sometimes of the year, whether it's related to a holiday, maybe it's weather related. It can also be items that are for sale all year long, but they sell differently at different times of the year. So an example of this is barbecue accessories. That can be for sale or purchased all year long, but during the warm weather months, you're going to see a spike in demand because people are thinking about barbecuing and being outside a lot more. Okay, so seasonal is both of these kinds of items. Keep that in mind. If I'm looking ahead to forecast for June, July, August, making a seasonal buy, I'm going to purchase quite a bit at one time. It doesn't really help me to look at January, February, and March of this year, right? Like that's not going to be a good indicator of what's happening for June, July, and August of this year. So I want to look at those same months the prior year. So that'll be kind of your baseline. What was happening at this time last year? Now, we know that over the last 12, 13, 14 months, obviously we've seen a spike in e-commerce for a lot of merchants, not in all sectors, but for a lot of merchants. So you may also want to think about what is that year over year increase. So from roughly 2019 to 2020, what kind of an increase did you see in these items? If you saw a 25% increase, then you may want to anticipate that you might have another increase here. Okay, so think about what happens at the same time the prior year and what your year over year increase is. Now for non-seasonal items, this is where we can look at the most recent period. For non-seasonal items, another consideration is, are your products really trendy? So if you're selling very trendy items, so this applies to fast fashion, this applies to some electronics, definitely, where you want to be super responsive to what your customers are buying most recently, you might only make that reference period the last couple of weeks. I've seen it as short as 3, which makes me extremely nervous, but you can do that. So think about, the smaller the set of data, the more volatile your forecast is going to be because you're using a very short amount or a very small amount of data. Whereas you have more consistent sellers, you're looking to kind of smooth out those predictions. You want to look at several months, 3 months, 6 months, even a year, to take a look at, okay, what's the average sales velocity over this time? Right now, I probably would back more than a year just because we know with the pandemic lockdown, such an inflection point for, I would say, nearly every merchant, that you want to think about, okay, what's most relevant to what we're forecasting? I probably wouldn't go back more than a year. That's the first step. Now, another key point here is thinking about what are my stockouts? Okay, so when was I in stock? When was I out of stock? This really affects the accuracy of your forecasting. Let's walk through an example. Let's say that we sold 30 units in 30 days. Okay, looks like a sales velocity of 1 unit per day. However, if we're paying attention to the stockouts, what if we were out of stock half of the month? Then the math changes pretty dramatically. 30 units, 15 days of availability, and our sales velocity is 2 units per day. So think about this at scale. This can be the difference between 100 units per day and 200 units per day, 1,000 and 2,000. So you can see how this really affects your forecast. If you're not paying attention to these stock days, then you could be under forecasting, you run out again, you have more stockouts, and it's this vicious cycle. So I think paying attention to your stockouts, especially for your key sellers, can really be a way to level up your forecasting if you're handling that with a spreadsheet right now. So think about how to get this in. Inventory Planner does take care of this for you automatically to take a look at your stockouts. Okay, so that's really key. So those are foundations to forecasting. We can take a whole deep dive on that, but just wanted to give you kind of the key points to consider. Now, when we're thinking about forecasting for multiple locations or multiple sales channels, the biggest thing that I want you to take away today is that each of these locations, each of these sales channels has its own personality. They will have different things that sell at different rates. For planning purposes, you'll have different lead time to get stock there. So we're going to walk through a couple of examples of what this looks like in the real world. So one of Inventory Planner's merchants is Bells of Steel. They sell home fitness equipment, so garage gym workout sets. You can tell that I don't know weights, but big sets for your garage, kettlebells, all sorts of weights. They're a Canadian company. And in Canada, they sold a lot of these home fitness equipment. So selling the whole package to get started at home. And they expanded into the US thinking that those would be their big sellers. But what they found very quickly was that the US market, people wanted to buy individual kettlebells or buy smaller sets. They didn't want the whole fitness equipment for their home. So when expanding into a new country, in this case, new geography, they really found that changed up how they would merchandise to different audiences. Obviously affects the sales velocity of what's going to happen in those different locations. So think about that. If you're selling, in their case, they have their own website, they're selling on Amazon. So if you're expanding from Amazon CA to .com, you can see some of these differences that are happening. Okay, another example is at the company that I used to run, Sit Stay. It's an opportunity to off my dog's modeling career. So we're going to do that here. So with Sit Stay, we sold online for a long time. This is a company I didn't start, but started in the mid-90s. So in internet years, super old. Had a lot of data for how things sold online. Selling pet supplies, collars, leashes, treats, toys, that sort of thing. And online, we saw that treats were most popular, followed by collars and leashes, and we just barely sold any toys. At one point, we opened up a brick and mortar store, and that category list that I just told you for how things sold online, you could basically turn it upside down for how things sold in a brick and mortar store. All of a sudden, toys went from less than 5% of sales to almost 50% of sales in the brick and mortar location. It was bonkers. And so we really had to change up, again, our merchandising. It needs to take up a much bigger footprint in the store because that's what people are coming in for, that's what they're looking for, and that's what's driving the revenue there. So really had to make some decisions on how do we get this stuff in? How do we shrink down the size for those collars and leashes? People weren't coming in for those as much as they were other products. So it's really important to think about these different sales channels, different territories, as they have their own personality. The customers for the two can be different, or they have different purchasing habits. As Brendan mentioned, maybe people start on social commerce and then they end up purchasing on your own website or on another marketplace. So think about, how are you getting them hooked on social, and then maybe how do you complete that purchase on your own website or on another shopping cart. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of the data? How do we forecast? So each of them, you're using the sales just for that channel, just for that warehouse or location to forecast the stock level at that location. And thinking about the lead time. So we're going to get into lead time just a little bit more here, but really thinking about how long does it take to get stock to this location? So, and finally, purchasing fee. So if I'm ordering from a vendor overseas, maybe I just put in an order monthly or even quarterly, but say you're sending stock from your main warehouse to Amazon, maybe that's a transfer that you make weekly, every other week, much more often. So that'll factor into your planning as well. Okay, let's go back to this lead time because it's really important to think about your purchasing workflow so that you're planning far enough ahead, right? Because we want to avoid those stockouts. That's what most of you said was your biggest headache. So we want to think about that. So let's go through two scenarios here. One, you're purchasing everything you need for all locations, for all sales channels from your vendor, from your supplier, sending it to a distribution center, your main warehouse, and then sending it to, if you have two store locations, or one is an Amazon warehouse, one is your own brick and mortar location. Okay, so you're sending out smaller amounts to those. In this workflow, this can be, really helpful when we're thinking about, okay, what do we need overall for all of these locations? Then you'll want to combine your data, your sales data, your stock data for all of this information to see what the total customer demand is in this case, okay? In this scenario, using a platform like Linnworks can be really helpful, again, to keep your stock levels in check, make sure everything's coordinated and accurate so that you're not overselling in one location when you don't really have stock. That's a key consideration. But in this workflow, you'll want to think about, for forecasting purposes, what's all of my data, my sales data, my stock data, okay? In another scenario, we could be sending directly from our supplier to each warehouse. That might be a better flow if you have domestic suppliers. So it makes more sense to send separately to East Coast and West Coast warehouses rather than everything to East Coast and then you're sending some of that to the West Coast. So think through that. I know that not many of you were interested or have headaches with overstock, but I think one thing to think about is, if you're overstocked in one location, can you move that to another location, or would you rather kind of liquidate in the location where it's overstocked? A key example of this is like Amazon. If you're overstocked at Amazon, yes, you can recall stock from that location. You can move out overstock. That's not very common though. So it's more common that you would liquidate at that location. Whereas maybe if you have some brick and mortar stores, you could move stock around between those locations and that might be more feasible. So just keep an eye on performance for each location for what's happening there as it relates to overstock as well as potential understock. Okay, let's get into Prime Day. So this year it looks like it will be in June. We don't know for sure. It's only May, but it looks like it will be in June. So this makes forecasting really tricky because in 2020 it was in October and in 2019 it was in July. Okay, so how do we forecast that? What I would suggest is taking a look at the performance of those prior 2 years to try to figure out what is that Prime Day bump. And just like Brendan mentioned, yes, we're looking at Amazon, but not exclusively Amazon, because people are thinking, okay, this is a big shopping day. And so we need to be prepared for this on our own website. We need to be prepared for this on other marketplaces. Okay, so don't get tunnel vision only on Amazon here. But isolating that bump, what I would suggest doing for 2020 is looking at your average rate of sales for April through September and comparing that to October. So what was your monthly sales rate compared to October? What we're trying to figure out is, did we see a 25% increase in October compared to those other months? And I'm specifically picking out April through September because January and February obviously operated very differently. March was very up and down from what we saw with merchants, with kind of lockdowns going in place. So I would say April through September can be an okay comparison. And then if you were also selling in 2019, compare January through June, see what that monthly rate is compared to July. That might even be a better predictor of what this year will look like, because in 2020, with it being in October, it might have affected Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales being so close, they might have cannibalized one another. So if you can get that July bump from 2019 to see what that was, that can add to your information for forecasting. Okay, so Amazon Prime Day coming up very soon. That's what I would suggest for forecasting in anticipation of that. So quickly, Inventory Planner focuses on forecasting. So we work with Linnworks. We work with 30 different platforms to get your sales data, your stock data, look at anything you have already ordered so that we can make recommendations and say, okay, it looks like you're going to run out of stock. here's how much more you need, and here's when you need to order it. So that's what Inventory Planner does, kind of in a nutshell. I'll just put up this slide at the end. I know we're going to take some questions, but I'll leave this up for a little while. Thanks so much for joining us. Feel free to reach out to Brendan. We both would be glad to talk with you or anybody on our teams to either try out or walk through a demo as well if you're interested in learning more.
Awesome. So, thanks so much, Jill. That was great. And just as another plug here, Linnworks is a fantastic integration with Inventory Planner. One question that comes up very often with our customers is it necessary to connect the different e-commerce connections along with Linnworks, like the inventory management system? And it's actually not the case. You could actually only connect Linnworks, and we could draw products, stock information, sales history. And if you don't have enough sales history, say you're coming into Linnworks and it's pretty new, no worries. You could always import some additional sales into Inventory Planner to use with forecasting and still just connect with Linnworks. We would see purchase orders, transfer orders automatically. And then as new recommendations are provided for POs or transfers, then you'll have the option to seamlessly just save that over to Linnworks to be able to manage those same orders over there, so that as they're received, Linnworks could manage the stock levels and everything, and all that information would just sync right back to Inventory Planner. Another just awesome benefit connecting through Linnworks is, you're getting a lot of steps that are otherwise manual as part of your configuration in Inventory Planner become seamless in terms of vendor setup and catalog setup, cost price information. That's where I'd also invite you to be sure to check out the integrations page. I think it's one of the only integrations where we would even see minimum order quantities or units of measurement. Like if you have case packs of 6 or 8 or anything, all of that would just come in automatically. And as you start adding new quantities to purchase orders, basically those get rounded to the nearest case pack. All of that just happens seamlessly because it would be just picked up directly from the inventory management system, which is super useful. Same idea as well if you, especially like around holidays, Prime Day or anything, if you're doing some bundling, some kitting of goods, you're selling 3 packs or 5 packs, whatever it might be, different ways of selling these products. Inventory Planner would pick up those relationships automatically from Linnworks. So you just set up in one place, and the Inventory Planner notices, hey, okay, every time you sold the 5 pack, it's the same as selling 5 of these individuals, or the same is every time you sell the 3 pack is the same as selling 3 of these individuals. All of that configuration happens automatically. So just super useful benefits just connecting between those two softwares. Again, yeah, so
super important for businesses as you're scaling. We often see a tipping point with companies when they're reaching, maybe in that 1 to 5 million point where they're saying, okay, maybe I was doing things with spreadsheets or I was kind of piecing things together, but now I can see some things breaking, or I'm spending so much time on this, I need to level up my tech stack. So I think that example that you gave, Basil, was like a perfect illustration of managing stock levels when you're selling bundles or assemblies, using something like Linnworks for that, then forecasting demand for all the components that go into it, using something like Inventory Planner for that. So I think when you're getting to that tipping with your growth, that's when you're looking at putting new systems into place, that we just see that over and over again with merchants.
Yeah, we'll see a lot of customers, for example, who sell, say, like in several different Shopify stores or different e-commerce stores. And when you sell in one location, you need the stock adjusted in another. So Linnworks is going to handle that seamlessly. And it's the same idea with, say, bundles or components that I was talking about there. You sell the 5 pack. So Linnworks is going to make sure that the stock is reduced to the individuals by 5 as well. And then the actual relationship comes over to Inventory Planner for the forecasting purposes. So we understand, okay, however you sell this product, it's different ways of selling this product. So make sure we push all the sales down to what we're actually going to order from those vendors. Super useful. And especially if you're also preparing for Prime Day or anything, another type of relationship there would be essentially just, it's in Inventory Planner, it's called assemblies planning. It's an ability to plan for pre-kitted goods. If you have to put some goods together, say before you send it to Amazon, you have to actually assemble these 5 packs before you send it and transfer over to Amazon. Those will all be different layers to the way that you can plan, whether it's production, purchase orders, or transfer orders through Inventory Planner with an integration directly to Linnworks as well as part of that.
Mhm.
So to that point, Jill, how do we forecast for new products that weren't listed last year during Prime Day?
Yes. Okay. So, short of having a crystal ball, we do have a couple suggestions. I advise the first. No. So, probably the best option for newer items is to look at similar items from last year. So, those could be maybe a similar style. They could be within the same brand, within the same category is even pretty good, because that way you're going to pick up on some seasonality. You're going to pick up on rate of sales, probably best if you did not have that item last year. And what you could do is basically borrow the sales history of an older item and apply it to that newer item to say, okay, how do we think this is going to apply for this year? So I think trying to find items that are as similar as possible is going to be your best bet to bring over that forecasting and get a sense for that, especially for seasonal items where you don't have a full 12 months worth of sales history. Definitely looking for similar items. That'll be your best bet there.
Yeah, and just extending on that, there is actually a feature directly within Inventory Planner that allows you to do precisely that. Say you're bringing in a new product, you don't have any history whatsoever. It's called combined sales stock, to essentially copy sales from that existing item over to the new item. Maybe it's going to do 80% as well because it's an incremental product in the line or something. So you can apply all of that and say, cool. Now, once it launches on May 31st, just use the sales of the new product. So those are all different ways that you can really dial in your sales and forecasting with Inventory Planner. So great information there. But especially we do see a lot of customers, in the context of the pandemic and just the growing e-commerce space, scaling, kind of coming out of just an e-commerce solution into whether it's Inventory Planner with an inventory management system. And there's just a lot to take in. Mm-hmm. When you're feeling overwhelmed, where do you recommend? Where does one start in trying to figure out what to order and where to focus?
Yes. So focus on your profit, first of all. So if you're only looking at revenue, that can be deceiving. If you don't have a high enough markup on your products, for example, you might see some big numbers potentially forecast with revenue. So focus on your profit of all. Brendan was talking about different marketplaces to get into. Consider also what the platform fees are there. So for example, an Inventory Planner will show you platform fees for Amazon. That's going to eat into your profit. So just making sure you're taking all of that into account. I would say, looking at, okay, if I invest, so we have a metric called GMROI, which is gross margin return on investment. Okay, what does that alphabet soup mean? It means, what is our return on investment after we've covered the cost of buying this item? And I think that really gets to, what are we trying to accomplish here? If I invest $1 in inventory, do I get $5 of profit out of that? Great. If I invest $1, do I get $1 out of it? Okay, then I can make some decisions based on available budget, what my cash flow concerns are, so prioritizing what you need to purchase first. One thing that we see a lot with merchants is, it's very easy to get overwhelmed with data. We know that there are cash flow concerns, a lot of sleepless nights due to cash flow concerns. So thinking about, okay, I can't buy everything under the sun. What are my highest priorities? You can use that 80-20 rule that we've heard about, right? So like, what's driving 80% of our revenue? It will probably be a surprisingly small amount of your products there first. Okay. So dive in on those first. Those are going to be your highest priority in terms of profit, bringing in additional cash so that you can buy more productive inventory, you can pay salaries, pay rent, etc. So I think focusing on the profit, what do we get after we've covered the buying that inventory? And I think, how soon are we going to recover that? So I might be forecasting profit, but I'll recover that in 12 months. In terms of selling to my customers and bringing in the profit there. Okay, in a cash flow world, that's a problem because my bill is due to the vendor a long time before that. So I've got to pay my bills. So keep an eye on not just what that profit is, but when you're forecast to get that profit. How quickly can I basically like feed the money machine? Like, how quickly do I invest in this inventory, get it back so that I can rinse and repeat and really continue to grow the company? So
Awesome.
there's
Thanks.
a lot there. That's where I'd start.
Yeah, to that point. So there was a question here at the very beginning as part of the poll. I saw most of our attendees are selling on 5 or more channels here. So I'm just curious, Brendan, Jill, either of you guys, what is that sweet spot? How many channels is optimal to be selling? Is it possible to be on too many and for that to possibly get out of hand?
I would say I don't think there's too many channels to be selling on, but to what Joe was saying earlier, when we see a lot of companies hit that 1 million, 5 million, or they're hitting those next phases of growth, you need to have the foundation in place to keep up with that, to keep up with wherever you're selling. So whether that's the right technical components like a Linnworks or an inventory planner, other solutions out there, but you need to have some systems in place because it becomes too manually taxing for businesses to keep throwing people at this or to throw more employees at it. You need to have ways to make sure that everything's cohesive across all the areas you are selling if you want to be taking advantage of continually growing on 5+, 7+, 10+. It's just having the right foundation to do it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. With that being said, we're here at the end already. A couple takeaways, just something to keep in mind. Expanding to the marketplace channels is the first step to seeing your business scale in this new effortless economy. As you're adding new sales channels, you're also adding more complexity overall to the operation. So to avoid risk of over or even underselling inventory, you can utilize a robust operations management platform to maintain visibility over all your channels, sales, and inventory to make the most informed business decisions. The second real takeaway here is optimizing cash flow and stock levels, looking at the unique needs for each channel and location. Of course, thinking about the lead time and how demand varies between locations. That being said, stay tuned for the recording of this session. It's going to be emailed out afterwards. And I just want to say thank you so much again to Linnworks for partnering with us on this session and for all of you, of course, for joining us today on the webinar. All right. So have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you all so much. All right. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.